Absolutely nothing beats windshield time. Welcome back to Dan the Road Trip Guy, a podcast where we have candid conversations about life lessons learned on the road. I'm your host, Bimmer enthusiast and road trip extraordinaire, Dan Neal. And now, on to the show. Well, I'm again on a virtual road trip today. I wish I was in the car with him because he has a really cool car now. My guest is Kevin Jackson. He's the CEO of his own company here. We'll talk about that. When I've known Kevin for about 8 years, we worked together for a number of those. What I really remember about Kevin, he's driven a minivan for about 20 years, and he just upgraded to this really cool Mercedes. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that later on in the show. But he's a cybersecurity professional. Just excited to catch up with him. It's been a few years. We've seen each other on and off, but really haven't spent much time together. So welcome to the show, Kevin.
All right. Thanks so much, Dan. It is a pleasure. It's an honor and a pleasure to be on here with you. Been listening to the podcast since not long after you got going, when you first let me know you were doing it, and it's fantastic. And I'm excited to get to be a part of it.
Well, thank you, and it's an honor to have you here. Kevin, I'd like to give my guest a couple minutes just to tell my listeners who they are before we jump into the meat of the road trip. But so who is Kevin Jackson?
Well, I am a 52-year-old father, happily married father of 5, which nowadays sounds like a lot. I don't come across a lot of people with 5 kids, but now 5 grown almost entirely kids. Living here in Mason, Ohio. I'm a cybersecurity guy, an ex-IT guy and consultant, definitely an entrepreneur, but really at heart, just a family guy, someone who loves the Lord, someone who loves being able to connect with people, spend time with people, and someone who likes, even though I'm all into technology, who likes being able to be on the creative side of things too. I'm a part-time musician, a part-time writer on the other side of the coin when I'm not doing technology and IT. So that's really me in a nutshell.
Renaissance guy, right?
Maybe that's accurate.
Well, this is Dan the Road Trip Guy. I always start my episodes with, tell me about your first car.
Well, boy, did I have stories there. When I was, young, just about to get my first car, my dad and mom put together and got me a 1984 Chevy Cavalier. And if you guys remember the Chevy Cavalier, I mean, it's a pretty basic car, right? It was a hatchback. It was silver. And I loved that thing like you wouldn't believe. And it was not the most sturdy, not the most, well-engineered car, but I absolutely ran it into the ground. I can't even tell you how many miles I put on that in the years I drove it through high school and college. It was one of the favorites of all my friends at the time. There's so many stories about, first of all, running that car to its extremes and fixing it often. That's how I learned how to do a little bit of car repair.
All right.
My dad was a car repair guy. He was someone who I've seen many times with friends, taking an engine out of a car and putting another one in our driveway. And he would do all of his own work on engines. And I learned very little of that, I'm sad to say, but I learned enough to be dangerous. With that Cavalier, I learned how to fix and take off and put back on a starter, how to change the brakes, how to do full brake jobs and do oil changes and those things. It was all, with my dad, which is honestly some of my best memories of keeping that car running with my dad, showing me what to do and what not to do and yelling at me when I did things wrong, but encouraging me to do things right. And just keeping it going until literally the wheels probably fell off towards the end of its life. It was a great car. And my friends still, 35, whatever it is years later, my friends still talk about that Chevy Cavalier and how great it was.
So silver on the outside, color on the inside?
Silver. It was bluish gray on the inside, if I remember right.
Okay.
Which ended up being a very faded bluish gray. By the time I was done with it, the ceiling was caving in, up top. The upholstery had come separated from the ceiling.
Sure.
Somehow I'd managed to break off the key in the rear hatchback so that I couldn't get it out. And instead of repairing it, we just left it that way so that anyone who knew me could just take another key or even a screwdriver and turn the lock and get into my car. So there was no security back then for that. And we kept it that way from years. It was great for hauling things. You could lay down the back seats flat and use the hatchback, and you could almost fit a full sheet of drywall back there. And it was a great car.
And did you sell it, trade it in, give it away?
We definitely gave it away at the end. When it was dead, I think we sold it to the junkyard for very little.
All right.
Because we'd done everything we could to keep it going, but it got to the point where my dad was like, "Yeah, it's not worth it anymore. Let's take it to the junkyard and move on to my." Then I had my first job then out of college and bought my own first car. which was a Nissan Sentra, a
Okay.
black Nissan Sentra that I thought was, just the most luxurious thing I'd ever seen when I first bought it. And it was actually pretty basic, but it had features in it. It actually had power windows and back then had power seatbelts, which I'll never forget. Those sliding seatbelts that
Oh,
would come
yeah.
back and oh yeah, had those. I thought I was, living the life of luxury. My first engineering job out of college.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I love people's first car stories. They're just so cool. Moving from there, epic road trips in your life. You got one?
Ah, absolutely.
I'm sure you have a
Uh,
few, but tell us one.
we here in our family have taken to going for an annual vacation down in Fripp Island, South Carolina, which is a little island just north of Hilton Head that is pretty much unknown. It's a private island, and you can only go on the island, drive on the island if you are renting a house there. So there's no tourist attractions. There's nothing except the houses and some golf courses and some small places to eat. Friends of ours turned us on to this place, and we fell in love. The thing is, it's nowhere near an easy airport. And if you're going to stay a week, you got to take, not only luggage, but your beach gear. It's not easy to transport all that down there, especially with five now grown kids.
Sure.
So we started back in, I think it was maybe 2018, 2019. We started renting a giant Sprinter van to drive down all seven of us and have room for all of our gear. That ended up being a real exciting part of every summer. Also all piling into this, 15 passenger, tall enough to stand up inside Sprinter van and all getting together, leaving in the middle of the night. I would love to leave in the dark because I didn't want to have half of the trip spent with everybody awake and wishing we were there. And because back then we had younger kids, they're older now. And so we would just start going at, 1 or 2 in the morning, and we would just get on the road, and I loved it. And they would sleep and we'd get up and, have breakfast, stop a little bit along the way. And it became a really exciting part of the vacation, just enjoying the road trip component of it. This year, we actually did an augmented version of that because for the first time, instead of just a regular Sprinter van, we have rented this party bus. It's a really nice Mercedes Sprinter. It's got televisions inside of it. It's got leather recliner captain's chairs instead of just the bench seating. It's got an upgraded sound system, all these things. And we were kind of forced into this, even though I love it, because we used to rent from one place right here in Evendale, and they no longer have them for rent. They canceled our reservation and said, "Oh, sorry, we can't rent to you anymore. We ran out of inventory." So we went and found another place, and it is fabulous. Just this gorgeous luxury van. So the kids are excited. I'm excited. We're going to have a great time, and it's always just a great time to bond. We don't really ever spend time together except for major holidays, all seven of us. But we get into that van and we're spending the whole week together. It starts off with that long trip in the car. And we just have a great time, sharing music and chat. Everybody's always laughing. Everybody's in good spirits. It's become a special thing.
And are you heading out on that soon?
We are. We actually leave a week from Sunday. It's
Okay.
the last week of this month. We'll be down in South Carolina. So we're really excited.
Do you remember any funny stories from any of those trips or anything crazy that happened?
I got a really funny story last year, actually, for that same van rental. When we got there to pick up our van last July for the same trip down to South Carolina, they told us, we're sorry, we're not going to necessarily be able to give you a van. And we're like, what do you mean? And the van we're renting you just came back. The person who rented it just brought it back from a fishing trip. When they brought it back, the cooler in the back full of fresh fish had turned over
Oh,
and
no.
spilled fish water all over the inside carpet in the rear of this Sprinter van. So they said, we've been trying to clean it for the last 24 hours and it still smells like fish. We don't know what we're going to do. We were faced with, okay, are we going to take the fish van or are we going to just drive our own cars, which would ruin the whole vibe of being together? We didn't know what we're going to do. And they said, we have a new chemical we're going to try. Just give us another 2 hours. So we didn't know what we were going to do. We waited 2 hours, and sure enough, when we got to the van, they opened it up. They said, all right, just tell us honestly, do you smell any more fish water? And by this time I had called my wife and let the kids know, and they were just beside themselves. We got to take the raw fish van to South Carolina. And I'm like, I don't know. We're going to see what happens. And sure enough, they got it out enough. When we got in there and I couldn't smell a thing. So at the last minute, we went ahead with the rental and drove down there. But the whole week, the kids referred to it as the fish van. And it's become the nickname for that whole trip.
Great story. You're just kind of a van guy, As long as I knew you were driving vans. But now you've
Yes.
moved on to a real car, a Kevin Jackson car, right? Tell me, take a minute and tell us about that car and why you chose that car.
Yeah, and it's funny too. When I was a teenager, I was a car person. Like I had Indy car posters on my walls when I was a teenager. I used to read Car and Driver. I was into cars. When I got out of college and started having family and kids, I kind of let that go. I kind of let that slide because honestly, we didn't have enough money to buy nice cars. We were starting off, we're getting our family started. We had a bunch of kids, and I just kind of let that go. And because we have five, we became minivan people. And for most of the time, we started in Maryland with our first four kids. We had our fifth here in Ohio. I drove minivans, and my wife and I had dueling minivans, one red or blue and the other one silver in our driveway, in our garage, for, easily 15, 16, maybe 17 straight years, because that's made sense, right? To get able to get all of us in a car and drive anywhere, you needed space. And we needed space for groceries and strollers. I really let go of the whole car thing for decades and just kind of forgot about it. I kind of let that part of me just kind of go fade away.
Sure.
Just this past year. And I realized my minivan's getting old and I really don't love it anymore. I never really loved it. It was functional, right? It got the job done.
Yeah, minivans are great, right? Minivans are great for what they do.
They are great for what they do. You can't beat the space, and again, there was so much we could do with it, but I realized now that it was time to no longer need one, I could get something I like. And it hit me, I don't know what I like. I mean, I was literally thinking, I would talk to my wife, like, I'm not really sure what I like anymore in cars. And it was a really kind of an interesting moment. I'm like, I don't know what I like. I mean, I used to love cars, and now here I was going to go buy one. My thoughts immediately went back though to a friend of mine who I was out in Maryland, maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And he had this Mercedes CLS 550 that he was driving. And I've never felt a car move like that, except for maybe I've got a friend who has a Porsche, and it's phenomenal. I mean, it's a little Boxster, just incredible.
Sure.
Love the thing. And I've never felt a car move like this Mercedes did. And I realized, wow, really did enjoy getting to ride in that thing. Never got to drive it. And then the more I looked around, I was seeing more of those on the road. And I thought, you know what, maybe a used nice car like that would be just the thing. It took me a while. I spent probably 6 months relearning what I really wanted. And because I knew I wanted something. I wanted horsepower. I didn't want a lot of cost either. But I realized, especially recently, as the new car market was how it's been post-COVID, I thought, well, maybe I can still get a deal on a used, low mileage, really nice little Mercedes. And then really that CLS 550 was calling my name. It's got a lot of horsepower. It's just gorgeous. And shockingly, I found exactly what I was looking for last fall. It's a 2015 CLS 550 4MATIC, leather interior, all the bells and whistles, sunroof. I've never had a sunroof in my life. I was so excited to have a sunroof. Here's the thing. It only has 40,000 miles on it.
That's a new car.
A 2015 with only 40,000 miles on it. And it is brand new. I could not believe it. And the price was really reasonable. I thought, okay, can this be real? And sure enough, it was. So I find myself now in this, 400 and whatever it is, 414 horsepower, gorgeous 4-door sedan. And every time I go anywhere, I literally look for excuses to get to go drive it. It is so incredibly fun to drive. And it's so unlike anything I've ever had. My wife and kids make fun of me. They're like, yeah, he's looking for an excuse to go drive that car again.
Yeah, exactly.
When I run out to the store, it's just it's so much fun. And I love let the kids drive it now. My son, in fact, just drove it today to drop my daughter off the airport. And he was so excited. And I was excited for him, getting to enjoy it. Just kind of, taking it out there, feeling the road feel of it. It's just a beast. And so I'm really, really excited. It's gotten me back to that car love that I had when I was a teenager.
Oh, that's great. Nothing beats a good German-built car.
Oh, my gosh, 100%. And I just didn't know. And it's all coming back to me now. So now, of course, I'm stuck now. And I don't know what I'm going to do after this, except for maybe get one that's a little younger. But it's just so much fun. It's a worthwhile hobby.
We'll switch gears a little bit and talk about career and work and what you're up to. You're in cybersecurity. As long as I've known you, that's what you've been around. How did you get into that?
Oh gosh. So really I found myself early in my career at a little bit of crossroads because I was an electrical engineer by degree. I started off my career doing hardcore engineering and antenna work and radar engineering, some satellite engineering work. But I got to a point where, in the around the turn of the 90s and the year 2000, that, I had the option to either stay in hardcore engineering or move more towards IT and information systems work and compliance and security. Back then, I remember I talked to a friend of mine who was older who gave me a piece of advice I'll never forget. And he's like, you know what? You really want to move towards security. That's going to be the future. And it was that point when I started leaning more into things about security architecture, enterprise architecture, and compliance. And I've never regretted that choice. Kind of turning my back on, being a hardcore electrical engineer and really becoming an InfoSec guy. So, and the opportunities kept coming because that field really has grown so much over the past 20 some years. So when I came out here to Ohio, I worked for Booz Allen up at Wright Pat Air Force Base in that compliance and IT enterprise architecture and security architecture space. And it just kept, that just kept developing, and it just kept getting more and more useful. And I saw that as all the threats expanded, that space just kept, drawing me in. And then we worked together, and I was, a security person then. And that's when I realized it's time to lean into another part of my background that I'd kind of ignored, which is my entrepreneurial side. Yeah, my dad never worked for anyone else that I knew. And the whole time my dad was alive, and he passed away back in 2020, he was his own businessman. He had started a company before I was born, doing janitorial services in Central Maryland, cleaning office buildings, mostly government and DoD contractor office buildings in the Annapolis and Baltimore areas in Maryland. I'd never seen either of my parents work for someone else. They both worked for that company, which is called Bay Janitorial Services, in the Chesapeake Bay. And I'd always kind of wanted to go that direction, but it never worked. I'd never been able to make it work. And all of a sudden, I realized the timing was right. It was, early 2019 to go out on my own and to become a consultant in cybersecurity. It worked. It worked really well. So I started off as a cybersecurity advisory services provider in early 2019. That company, Waypoint Cybersecurity, is still up and running today. But more importantly, a year ago, I started a second cybersecurity company, actually making a product, a software as a service product for cybersecurity decision makers that we're actually selling now. That we built a team, we've got 20 employees now, and we've developed a software tool for those in cybersecurity to have basically a tool to use to calculate the optimal approaches for cost benefit in their cybersecurity program. That's been just an incredible ride getting that up and running, and we're kind of off to the races with it now.
Kind of a move away from the day-to-day cybersecurity and more into helping people plan and have the right tools in place.
Exactly right. Yep. Away from really as an advisor and as a consultant. Now, I worked with maybe 45 companies over the past 5 years, but now this is a different sort of a way to help cybersecurity be managed globally by producing a single tool that has a global reach. That we're gathering data from all over the world, and we're analyzing cybersecurity strategy data to calculate and let users know if you really need to keep your organization secure, but you've got limited dollars and you've got limited people. What are the things that have the best bang for the buck? What actually are the highest value activities and approaches and tools that you can use for a company like yours in your industry and of your size? That's something that I always wanted when I've been working in cybersecurity, and I realized we could create that tool. And so that's what we've done. And it's really exciting to be able to offer something that can really help. And it's honestly revolutionary. We patented our approach because there's no other tools out there that calculate the best strategies using real world data and that really take into account people costs and tool costs in doing so.
Do you focus on the Fortune few? You focus on small company, mid-size, or all the above?
Literally all the above. In our first few paying customers that started with us last fall, we have a giant Fortune 100 company and we have a small company with less than 100 people. Those were our first two in the door, and they both had the same needs, and they're both still customers now. Yeah, it's all the above, and it's industry agnostic because we have data from almost every industry under the sun. So we can get close to almost every industry there is a code for. So we're really kind of size and industry agnostic.
Well, congratulations on that. I know you're going to do really well just because I know you, and I know that's what you'll do. And you got a few
Thank
of
you.
the Jackson clan working with you, don't you?
Sure do. And that's been one of the most amazing things is that my daughter, she's 26 years old, Katie, and my son, Jeremy, are both in the company full time, helping manage and structure what we're doing. And a younger of my younger of two sons is a part timer with us as well. My younger two daughters are one going to college and one still in high school. They're not in the company, and I think they're pretty much determined to not be in the company. The older three are absolutely involved in helping us grow this, and it's really exciting because it works. They work well together, and we're working well with our overall team, and it's been really great to get to see that.
You've been places, you've done things. What's on your bucket list?
Oh wow! So my bucket list items are one of them that jumps to mind is something I don't know. Maybe it's not a bucket list for a bunch of people because I know friends who have done this, but I just don't know when I'm going to get to. So it's still on my bucket list. I really, really want to see the Holy Land. I want to go to Israel and get to do that kind of tour. I've got lots of friends who have gone and done it. I know people who, in fact, I have a friend of mine who's going again here in January. He's been telling me I need to go. I don't know when I'm going to have the time to make that happen or when it's going to work. But it's really been on, that's something that's been on my heart for a long time to get to go and do those foot tours, those walking tours through all those areas from biblical history and see it for myself. It may be a while till I get to do it, but it is really high on my list to get to do that. Something that's much more, smaller scale that's on my bucket list. I've seen advertisements for these places where you can go and rent or just buy time driving like a supercar.
Sure.
Like these amazing automobiles and get to drive them on a real track and all of that. My same friend who has a Porsche, he sent me a couple of times some ads for one of them down near Atlanta, I think it is, where you can like drive a Lamborghini or a Ferrari and just put it through its paces. That's on my list. Got to make that happen.
You mentioned when you were telling us who you were, author and musician. I don't think I knew the musician part. What do you play?
Yeah, I play drums and guitar. I don't play either like exceptionally well, but I'm good enough to be dangerous. Both. I still have a nice guitar that I play every now and then. I actually got rid of my drum set just in this past year while cleaning out our basement. But I'm bound and determined to get an electronic drum set again in the future. Quieter, but still lets me, go to town playing some rhythms. I love drumming, but I'm a better guitarist than I am a drummer. So I'll put it that way. When I was in high school and college, I was part of a garage band. My friends and I would play pretty regularly, self-taught, and would just have fun playing covers of the songs we love, mostly classic rock. And it's so much fun. And I still love whenever I get a chance to play.
Well, keep that up. I believe everybody needs a hobby of some sort for sure.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
As long as I've known you, you've had some books that you've been trying to get published. What's going on with that these days?
Well, the funny thing is it's still going on. I have a wonderful literary agent that is supporting me. And every now and then I'll still steal time aside to do a little more writing. I write mostly young adult and middle grade fiction, fantasy fiction. My whole goal in life, honestly, big picture, is to be able to, go through the cybersecurity company development cycle and have that be successful and one day retire from cybersecurity. And as an older retiree, get back to writing books, get back to creating stories that are going to relate and connect to kids, whether they're teenagers or even younger kids, with stories that have real meaning. I was heavily influenced by C.S. Lewis, by the writings of Tolkien, fantasy stories that are really allegories to teach real world messages to young people all over the world. And that's one of the things that's always just kind of, burned inside me is there's not enough of these stories being told. I feel like, especially to younger kids, especially to younger kids that are not necessarily growing up in the nice suburbs, younger kids who are growing up in harder conditions, or they're in the inner city. They come from backgrounds where stories that teach and that connect with them deep inside can really change their outlook, can maybe help change how they grow up and what choices that are made. Just always been a believer in that. So that's always in my mind, even while I'm, deep in the tech world now. One day I'll also be able to put more time back into writing.
Maybe that's, when you retire. My last episode, I was interviewing a friend of my brother's who I took a road trip with, and he's a retired IT guy, and his book is coming out next month on Amazon. It's a fiction I think it's a crime type story, but excited to read it.
That's fantastic. I've got to go listen to that.
Yeah,
That's great.
One of my favorite questions I love to ask people is, if you could take a road trip today with anyone, living or deceased, who would it be? Where would you go? What would you drive? What would you talk about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have a pretty easy answer to that for me because there's one side of my immediate family that I never knew because on my father's side of the family, I've never had the opportunity to meet or know either of his parents. And that's always something that is, that's kind of bothered me. And we don't even have many pictures because, again, given where that was, my father was born in 1935. Both of his parents had died before he reached age 20. So
wow.
I never met them, never knew them. And I think we have maybe 2 pictures of them in all of our picture collection that survived until now. Honestly, my answer to that is I would love to take a road trip with my grandmother and grandfather from my father's side of the family that I never got to meet. Because honestly, he doesn't remember them very well. Back when we talked about it, he would say, now he remembers a few stories here and there, but he didn't actually spend a lot of time with them growing up. A lot of his time growing up, he was raised by his aunt and uncle down in South Carolina. I would love to just get to find out who they were and ask them what their stories were and, what they liked and didn't like. And I don't know, just kind of get to know them because I knew my mom's parents really well. My Granny Carol on my mom's side actually just died about 10 years ago. On my father's side, there's just a whole set of stories there that have already kind of been lost, that we don't really know what their stories were. And I would love to put them in a car, put them in my Mercedes, honestly, because I think they really like it.
Yeah.
And go for a drive, in the back country and just find out what their lives were like and, what their dreams were and who they were.
That would be so fun. And, I tell people, and particularly young people today, if they have family living, be that grandparents or even parents, you need to set them down and you need to hear the stories. And so pull out your phone and turn on the voice recorder and just record those stories. We were able to do that with Linda's dad. I did not get to do that with my parents. I really just didn't think about it. I always thought, there'll be tomorrow, there'll be the next
right.
day. And so
Yes.
I just, I encourage everybody, find these stories, because when people pass away, you're left with hundreds of questions that you wish you had asked.
Absolutely right. Yes. And just recently, I was out in Maryland visiting my mom again, who just turned 80, with our kids. And we had a session like that where they got to just hear stories from her. And there were stories she told that I had never heard before. I heard details coming out from her youth that I was shocked that, wow, I've never heard this. It's so true. So important to get to have that time and use it to capture all those memories.
Kevin, it's crazy. We're coming to the end of our little virtual drive here. I want to leave our drive, though, with tell people how to find you, the company, charity, whatever you want to share. Absolutely.
So you can find me at Level 6 Cybersecurity. It's the name of our startup. We're at Level 6, the number 6, level6cyber.com. And of course on LinkedIn as Kevin E. Jackson. There's a lot of Kevin Jacksons out there, so you've got to have the E in there as well. Yeah, that's where you can find me anytime. And the same names are out on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, elsewhere. Of course, happy to be found as we are very much in a growth mode in our cybersecurity practice that we're building at Level 6.
Well, I know for a fact it's going to be successful. And it's just been an honor. It's been an honor to ride around with you here virtually. I wish we were together. Someday we will be, and we can take another ride.
Absolutely. Sounds like a plan.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dan the Road Trip Guy, and we look forward to having you back again next time. In the meantime, if you want to find me, you can find me on the internet at Danny, D-A-N-N-Y, Neal, Neal.com. Until we meet up again, keep having conversations and keep driving.